Hi everyone, welcome to our revision resources video. My name is Daniel. I'm the education manager for the school. You've probably seen me around on campus helping out with different bits and bobs. So one of my primary responsibilities is inviting myself into your sessions and talking to you about what you're doing, talking to your academic about how they're communicating to you and the sort of teaching quality and methodology they're using. And I also coordinate revision resources and student voice. So this is part of what I'm doing today, is to try and formalize and standardize the revision resource that you guys have so that you can make the best of the revision time that you've got prior to your exams. And I've got my colleague John here with me.
Hi, I'm John Woods, Director of Education in CSEE. I do a lot of work with Daniel because Daniel's very student facing. I tend to be more behind the scenes, just trying to maintain the standard of the education and the qualification in the CSEE department.
Brilliant. So today what we're going to do is do a bit of role play where John is going to be the academic, the fount of all technical knowledge and wisdom that he is. So won't be much acting on his part.
Try to be, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be the clueless, ignorant, and unwieldy person that I am, but in a student role. So I'm going to be asking him questions I won't know the answer to, as I'm not an academic or indeed a student. So it will help me construct my approach to how I would take an exam if I was taking one.
And I think it's fair to say, Daniel, it's not you making these questions up. These are questions that you've taken in your student-facing role as, students are genuinely asking these questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my first act as a student, I'm committing an act of plagiarism by using other people's work. So I'm using other people's questions and passing them off as my own. So don't follow my example. What is it? Do as I do, not as I. No, do as I say, not as I do. That's the one. Okay, brilliant. So if I just pull these up. So John, if I just ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
And then we'll talk. If you give your response, and then we could just talk about how we can flesh those out. But I'll try and keep us to time. So let's make a start. So how do I set up a good working environment at home for the actual exam itself? So how, if I've got pets, or if I've got children, or if I've got other family members or household members, how do I try and make sure that I've got a good environment to revise and take my exam in?
It's quite a broad question because you're always going to be in environments where you're going to get disturbed. You've probably been past my office on several occasions, and there's usually a queue outside the door and half a dozen people inside. And believe it or not, even I'm still in a position where I'm learning, and creating that learning environment, you have to take some quite drastic steps, really. So many of the students will have lived in halls of residence where there's a large number of disturbances. You've got your social life, you've got students next door inviting you out and so on. And under those conditions, I think people are quite used to just closing their door, maybe even putting a note on, please do not disturb for the next X amount of time. I think quality time is a very big issue, but quality time is relatively short. To sit down and try to do revision material for long periods of time isn't particularly constructive anyway. So if you're going to try and work as hard as you possibly can for hours and hours and hours on end, your ability to learn is just going to tail off. Whereas if you're doing short bursts, what a short burst is down to your own preferences, but 30 minutes to an hour where you're really concentrating, you've got no disturbances from the outside, that's quality learning time. And once you've done that, once you've achieved a small milestone that you set yourself, then if you've got disturbance from pets, go and play with your pet, go and play with your young child or whatever, but try and get it into that frame. So nobody's going to be able to find themselves, right, I'm going to revise for 6 hours. One, that's a silly thing to do, and two, it's going to be almost impossible to find that time allocation anyway, because you would be disturbed by outer things. You'll also be disturbed by your own brain, because your own brain will get fed up and start to drift away anyway. But directly answering the question, I think you have to be quite brutal in that respect. If you're going to do some revision, there's lots and lots of different situations, but students are used to this because they are living with other students anyway. But in a home environment, if you live with your parents or whatever, just explain to them that you need this time, that the next hour you're not going to be available to do whatever as far as your dog or your cat or whatever is concerned. Well, cats, feed them, dogs, take them for a walk. You've got all of these things which are just going to placate that animal or that person for long enough so that you can get that that amount of time in there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So this kind of feeds into that in a way, but is maybe a little bit broader and a bit more open to interpretation. So what would you define as a healthy revision routine? So there are things like getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, taking enough exercise and being active in the right way. So what would be, to you, what would be a healthy revision routine?
Well, a healthy revision routine is, in my opinion, little and often, this massive cram at the end simply doesn't work. It puts you under huge amounts of pressure and stress and so on. People have different times of the day when they learn better than others. My peak time is probably an hour and a half, 2 hours after I've got out of bed. The worst time, I personally, and I know it's different for lots of different people, the worst time I could possibly learn is 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. To a certain extent, my brain wakes up again about 9, 10 o'clock, and I could do some studying then if I wanted to. But we all know the times at which we're better at learning. So make sure those times are allocated. If your magic time is early afternoon, then that's the time you should be putting those couple of hours in revision for that particular subject. So it's all about the timing. It's all about, your own biorhythms. It's all about understanding your own mind and so on. The other thing about revision, say for example, you've got 6 subjects to take in an exam this June. To do all of one subject just before the exam is a crazy situation to be in. You should be preparing an exam timetable 6, 8, 10 weeks before the actual exam's there and chipping away at each individual subject a little bit at a time so it's all mixed together. You're not learning one thing singularly and then moving on to another thing singularly. You'd be looking to do 30 minutes, 40 minutes on one particular subject and then 30, 40 minutes on another subject. And in that way, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the crossovers in between the different pieces of education. And also you're keeping your mind active. You're stopping it getting dug in or stuck on one particular subject area. And often when you leave something out of frustration because you don't understand it, after a period of time, your mind can mull it over and of course you can make sense of it. As far as the healthy bit is concerned, well, I personally don't favour very late at night sessions because it just, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. So I'd always recommend that you try and do your work during the day. It's like a 9 to 5. I mean, most office hours are 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. There's a reason for that. And that's the kind of model that you should be trying to bring in there. Obviously, going out with your friends and drinking excessively isn't going to be conducive to revision the following day. Drinking large amounts of water, I've heard, is quite constructive. I must admit I'm addicted to tea, so tea is the one for me. But caffeine or even tannin can be quite counterproductive because it has been shown scientifically to scramble the mind a little bit. So, probably don't drink too much coffee. Certainly, if you're going to do a presentation to somebody, the worst thing that you can do is load yourself up with caffeine because you may think that you're doing a thoroughly good job, but in actual fact, you're doing a less well job.
Absolutely. That also has the unfortunate consequence about 45 minutes to an hour after drinking, but we won't go into that. So one of the things on that I would just add as well is that I'm an incredibly lazy person, and I try and turn that into an efficiency. So instead of creating a new routine, I often, in my laziness or efficiency, depending on how you want to spin it, I will bolt good practice or something I know I need to do onto something else. So if there's something I do every day, eat lunch, eat dinner, go to bed, I will bolt things that I know that I should be doing or need to do onto those things. So I know that, you know, an hour before I go to bed, I'll try not to watch anything or have any screen time because I know it will mess with my,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Well,
circadian
coming
rhythms.
on to that, Daniel, screens are a big killer. I mean, put that mobile phone in the desk, put it on silent, or turn the blasted thing off, because that is absolutely going to destroy
Mm,
any revision because you're just going to be superficially going into it.
mm,
The other thing that works for me is maybe not everyone thinks this way. I have a kind of reward syndrome in my mind. So I think, right, I'm going to try and understand that for the next 20 minutes. Once I have, I'm going to reward myself and have a cup of tea. Or I'm going to have that cake, or I'm going to have that biscuit, or whatever. So
mm.
I always put something ahead of me, which gives me some enthusiasm to get through something that I might not at that time be enthusiastic for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brilliant. So what a couple of other bits. So talking about, we've talked about the actual revision process. So if we get onto the actual exam itself, or the take-home exam via phaser,
Yeah,
that we have for this summer term for
yeah.
2020. So one of the questions on a lot of people's minds are, what do I do if my internet cuts out, or what if I struggle to upload on time?
Mm.
You know, some people might be aware of the exam time being an hour and a half or 2 hours, and there being this 1 hour submission time.
Yeah.
So how do people, if people have technical issues, you know, where can they get support in the actual exam?
Well, firstly, let's come on to the delivery mechanism. So under an ideal situation, you would go to phaser. You all know how to go into phaser. We can show you demonstrations of that, or we will show you demonstrations of that later on, but you should already be aware of that. You go into phaser, you can only see one person's name, and that's your own name. You'll see the module or modules that you're taking at that particular time, and by clicking on it, you should then be able to download in the left-hand side of a normal internet browser. You'll see that file come in. Right-click on it, view in folder, open, and then save it to somewhere that's convenient for you. That should really just take a matter of a few seconds to do. In the event that doesn't work, we've got a whole series of Zoom rooms which are set aside with the academic and technical staff sat there ready, willing, and able to help you. Um, the There's really two brackets this fits into. So you've got problems, technical problems, as in the download, as in the upload, as in the tools which are delivering the material to you, and you've got the problems associated with the paper itself. So it's not unheard of for there to be something ambiguous in one of the questions, and students want clarity on that. Well, that's why we have the academics sat on ready, willing, and able. So say, for example, you're doing 151 or whatever, there will be a link on there which will take you to firstly an FAQ, and secondly to a Zoom room where that academic will be sat there ready to take your questions. On standby, we have our fine technical staff sat there ready to help you. If for some reason or another you can't get it by phaser, we'll give it to you via Moodle, we'll email it to you, we'll deliver it to you by any number of means, but you just need to let us know that that problem has occurred. Now, will that be taken into consideration in the examination time? Yes, if it's a significant problem which has impacted, yes, of course it will. But the model that we have, our exams, almost without exception, I can't think of an exception, are 2 hours long, and we've allowed 3 hours to do the exam. Now, I suspect human nature is going to be such that you won't do the exam for 2 hours plus take 1 hour to upload and for the inconvenience and so on. But people are going to try and carry that to the wire a little bit and probably work for more than 2 hours on it. Well, okay, that's your prerogative, but there's a risk associated with that. That 1 hour has been put in place to allow for any type of inconvenience that you may experience. So if it does take you 10 minutes to download that paper at the beginning, okay, it may have flustered you a little bit, but you still got all of that time to make that adjustment. That's what that hour is for.
Mm.
So if it goes swimmingly, there's an hour there that you don't need. If you do get problems, there's plenty of time to be able to iron those problems out.
Yeah, I think that's important as well to note, because the while there is this extra hour, some people, and me being one of them, might think, oh, I've got an extra hour. You know, I can go an hour slower, or I can take an extra hour to read through my answers
Yeah,
and change stuff. But really, I think everyone's got an obligation to make sure at least some of that hour, even if it's just 5 minutes, is
yeah,
devoted to minimizing the technical difficulties they might have for their own
yeah,
sake, you know, as well as the actual process of submitting,
yeah,
to make sure they've got a copy saved, to make sure they know, you know, they have a phaser window open and the submission window open, to make sure they've got the Moodle FAQ forum for that module open in case they need to ask the academic something quickly. You know,
yeah,
just make sure you're prepared. I mean, making sure you're prepared online is the same as making sure you've got your bottle of water, to make sure you've got your calculator with you, to make sure you've got note paper in case you need to do a drawing and take a picture and upload it. You know, just making sure you're prepared for the exam. You do that in an in-person exam. You know, you go in, they check your calculator, you know, you got your water with you, you got your pens and paper and everything like that. I guess what we're trying to say is we're trying to normalize it as much as possible and make sure that people repeat that good practice when they're at home doing these
yeah. The
exams.
actual action of doing the exam paper should really have no different feeling to being what should be less stressful actually than being in an examination hall, boiling hot with invigilators sort of looking over your shoulder and everything. So that side of the pressure is gone, which I think in a way is a lot more pleasant.
Brilliant. So we've got one final question here, just around actually completing exams.
Yeah,
Is guidance on completing exams abroad? So obviously, we're facilitating remote completion of exams. This is the first time we're doing completely virtual take-home exams via phaser. If
yeah,
there are people who are doing it abroad, say someone in Europe, or if there's someone in China, so most of our exams will be in the morning. So if there's a sort of quick maths 5 or 8 hour difference, I'm not sure,
yeah, yeah.
around that, then you know obviously they'd be doing theirs later in the afternoon or in the evening. Is there, you know, any guidance around that or policy that we can talk about?
Apart from the time difference, Daniel, there's no. I mean, there's the exams are deliberately released at kind of the optimal time. One of my colleagues is writing a bit of software at the moment, which is looking at time differences such that we don't disadvantage or the same person. Say, for example, someone who has returned home to China always has their examinations at 8, 9 o'clock at night. So we are trying to do it in a round robin way so that, okay, you have a time which isn't that pleasant. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to take the exam 8, 9 o'clock at night, but that won't always occur for that person. So we're trying to shift things around a little bit so that there's a bit of fairness on the time zones. But rest assured, you won't be asked to do an examination at 3 o'clock in the morning or anything silly like that. We're going to be perfectly reasonable about that.
Brilliant. No, it's good to know that even though these are things that students might feel, you know, in their home countries a bit isolated about and not really know about, it
Yeah.
is something we're not only looking into, but we're exploring as a, you know, we're
Yeah, and
researching it.
the support will always be there regardless of what time the exam is because despite the fact it's in different time zones, obviously it's all simultaneously on the surface of the globe. So everyone's taking their exam at the same time. It's just different time zones.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. Well, I think that that concludes our quick fire question
But
answer
there,
session.
there was one you didn't ask me, Daniel, which was
Oh yeah.
really about how do I fill the exam in? I'm
Oh yeah.
surprised students didn't come up with that one because to me that's a very obvious thing. So you've on Phaser, you've downloaded your examination paper, you've opened the front and think, oh, this is easy. Now I'm going to start writing. And but what do you write on? Well, you're perfectly free to use a Word document or equivalent, just raw text, anything you want. Some people don't like typing, so some people feel more comfortable with a good old pen and paper. I must admit, I'm one of these people. I scribble everything down on bits of paper. So you're free to do that, but that's no good. How do you upload that? Well, um, Do you know anyone without a smartphone, Daniel? I'm not sure I do, but
No, I
okay,
don't. No.
there could be someone out there with a smartphone. If that is the case, you're going to need to get yourself a digital camera ready and on standby so that you can photograph the 2 or 3 pages of your handwritten examination. This is also going to be useful for figures, diagrams, equations, and so on. If you're lucky enough to own a tablet, then of course you've got the best of both worlds, because you can scribble away on the tablet in the same way as you can also type on the tablet, but you can draw equations, figures, and so on, and you can have it all inside the same document. Now, this comes down to the exam preparation and how you feel most comfortable doing it. I personally would have a sheet of paper in front of me. I would have my mobile phone, and I would just complete my examination after the 2 hours or a few minutes that I might have borrowed into the next hour. And then I would photograph those and upload those as individual JPEGs, however many pages I have, maybe 5, 6, whatever. Straight back into Phaser. You're the only person that can log into that Phaser account, so it's definitely your material which is in there. And at the other end, the marker will decipher between, you've got half of it written in Word, one of your pictures was done on this, you had an arrow from this page to this page. We'll work it out. We'll work it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that point about being prepared as well, thinking in your mind, well, if I do need to do this, do I have the tools? So I know I've got a scanner. It's actually about 10 years old or so. I actually inherited it from my grandparents, so it's not going to be cutting edge. And my scanner you can plug it in via USB, which is the safest method, or it can be done via Wi-Fi. Now, I know that I can do it remotely via Wi-Fi, but it's a lot more reliable if I plug it in. So it's just that quick, thought process and then action to guarantee that you have the easiest time and the least stressful time when you're actually in a time sensitive situation.
I think the safest way is a Word editor document and associated separate photographs that you have. And I did take some feedback from a student that said, well, actually, I'm not very fast at typing. And also took some feedback from a student that I'm not very good at writing. And both of those, I've seen examples of that. Well, that's fine. Then use the medium which you're most comfortable with.
Yeah,
but I personally, either a camera or a mobile phone, I think you've got everything covered. Absolutely everything covered, and you've got an hour to do that upload.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to stress about that choice as well. There are quite a few things that are formalized with this exam process, but the element of student choice, student preference, we're not going to be too prescriptive about this. So whatever makes the students, more comfortable is absolutely what you can do with that. That's fine, however you feel best to do it.
And if anything goes wrong, everything's time-stamped, so we can see when the document was last edited. We can see the attempted upload time. We can pull the bits out, and if something goes absolutely wrong and you're late on the deadline or whatever, we can even deal with that. I mean, we're in difficult times, and we're trying to be as accommodating to students as we possibly can, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the good things to do if you do have technical difficulties or lose connection or something, just take a screenshot, do a print screen or snip so that we can see the time and you can see the error code you're getting. Similarly, if you do query the wording of a question on your Moodle forum, your student FAQ, then ask the question of it in the forum, say, oh, I didn't know this. Then at least you know that was submitted at that time on that date. You attempted to ask the question, but then your internet connection cut out and you weren't able to get clarification on it. So it's all about just being, sensible and sort of kind to yourself, to give yourself the time, but also to make sure that your sort of record keeping, if you like, is going to benefit you ultimately in the long run. Okay, brilliant.
Good. Hope that helps.
Yeah, no. So we'll be back soon with some more tips and a bit more structure on sort of styles of learning and that sort of thing. So until then, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you later.